Don't think, just Google, Patrick.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
But yeah, so we're doing something a little bit different today. A few other guests. We've had John Michael, we've had Kelsey, and we're going to get Aradia on tonight.
Now, am I finally
Aradia. I swear to God, it's Aradia.
It's
okay. I have to convince everyone how to say it. So I have to train literally everybody I meet on how to say my name. It's just like Arabia.
Like
it's just like Arabia.
Aradia.
All right.
We're actually here today, Seth, to talk about Chapter 23. I'm going to just start trying to do this every time.
I think it's a good idea, Patrick.
Okay. Chapter 23, The Testing. And her symbol is the Flame of Tarvalin. I like the first two paragraphs here. We'll break in. Nynaeve warily eyed the edge of the huge chamber. Far beneath the white tower, she eyed Shiriam at her side, just as warily. The mistress of novices seemed expectant, perhaps even a little impatient. In her few days in Tarvalin, Nynaeve had seen only serenity in the Aes Sedai, and a smiling acceptance of events coming in their own time. The domed room had been carved out of the bedrock of the island. The light of lamps on tall stands reflected from pale, smooth stone walls. Centered under the dome was a thing made of 3 rounded silver arches, each just tall enough to walk under, sitting on a thick silver ring, with their ends touching each other. Arches and ring were all of one piece. She could not see what lay inside. There, the light flickered oddly.
I was thinking that from overhead, this thing would look like a circle with a triangle drawn inside of it.
That sounds right.
Because you have this outer circle, and then above it you have these 3 points on the circle where the rings come together. And so if you're directly overhead, it would kind of look like...
Is that the symbol for Randland?
I thought Randland... Yeah, I think it is. Isn't it a circle with a... Or was it an upside-down triangle?
Don't think, just Google, Patrick.
What it's supposed to represent. But I
Right.
just thought it was an interesting parallel, considering this is a Terran Grial that takes them into alternate portal sort of dream. I think it's Teleran Riyadh.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I think it's almost definitely in the world of dreams.
But each of those, she goes through the 3 rings, basically 3 sides of that triangle for each part of the test.
So you walk in a circle inside the circle?
And I think you come out from the same side you went in. So it's not like stepping through a doorway where you step through one side, like you're stepping into the circle. She doesn't step through the ring to the inner part of the circle.
You're making sense. Out the same way she came in.
She goes out the same way she came in. And so she does that 3 times. So she never actually enters the center of the circle. Or when she is in the circle, it's because she's inside the alternate dream world. And then when she steps back through the portal, she steps back through the real world.
I will sacrifice a goat to make this work.
Oh, I heard that. How many goats will it take?
Right, so when I got cut off, I wanted to ask where we think the Terran Grial takes her. That was what I was curious about.
I personally think that it is a dream shard.
Okay, that was what I was thinking too. Or something specialized like that, but not exactly like that.
Yeah.
Because the way it makes her face her fears, I wonder if it was some sort of psychological nightmare creator that was very specific to that, whereas dream shards seem to be maybe a more dynamic research environment. I don't know.
Is it Shiriam that says later that these Terangriel go deep into your mind and find what will challenge you the most? And
yeah,
so there's that, and if that's the function of the Terangriel, then I would think that they would it would have to be something that creates a dream shard, because mainly my best evidence is the thorns in Nynaeve's hands, and that she actually gets stabbed.
We know this is a Teleran Riyadh related Terran Grial.
Yes. Because
of the feedback that later happens with Egwene and her stone ring.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes sense.
So we know at least it must be related to the world of dreams. But it seems like just transporting them into general Teleran Riyadh would not be sufficient, because then it wouldn't have the control,
Right.
Right, and to be way more dangerous.
Yeah. But it makes sense that in these dream shards, we see a lot of sort of mixed injuries where sometimes they get hurt and sometimes they don't when they're hurt in these alternate worlds. We see that with Rand's dreams a lot with Ishmael, and I think we see that again here. The fact that it continues after the doorway goes away, though, makes me think that there's something a little more going on there.
And it's different from like the test of the shawl because like the other Aes Sedai don't see what she's going through. They're not influencing it. Like with the test for the shawl, they are throwing stuff at her.
Oh,
right.
Whereas in this, it's very much just her own subconscious and like only the details about the world that she has to work with creating that.
I noticed at the end of the chapter, and I looked this up to be sure, when Nynaeve is talking to Lan and Lan says like, "Are you sick?" Like, all right. And at some point he's like, all right, I'm going to go fetch such and such Sedai because it seems like something's wrong with you. That is that's a real person, but she's not an Aes Sedai yet. And Nynaeve doesn't know her.
Not yet.
So this isn't
so weird.
This isn't just from Nynaeve's mind. It's from the real world somehow.
Okay, so here's a thought I had on that, because I looked up Sharina, and so apparently Sharina's whole life, she was really, really into Malkir. Like, she, like, held it in the highest regard and, like, really wanted to go visit.
I saw that.
And she's, like, what, in 70s or something?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, like, decades of her, like, literally dreaming, like, sort of filtered into Tel'aran Riyadh. And then when it's creating this, like, little bubble experience for Nynaeve, it's like, hey, there's, like, some material from the real world that, like, is related to Malkir, and I'm going to, like, filter that in somehow. That was the best I could think of, because how else is someone who's real and who she hasn't met yet in her experience?
Unless this is a real alternate reality somewhere.
They say the first time is for the past, the second time is for the present, and the third time is for the future.
Yeah.
So somehow the third vision has to, I think they all pull from the real world and pull, like I think the Wisdom, who is a real person in this second vision.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything is, but it's not someone who Nynaeve has ever met before.
That's a good point. There's another.
So I think that the Tehran Grial definitely, just like Tel'aran Riyadh, pulls from the real world, and this one pulls from the pattern and is actually able to, figure out what's going to happen, because we know that Sharina becomes Aes Sedai in the future. She joins the White Tower. And so this could very much be a couple of years after the last battle. Lan and Nynaeve are married, and Sharina's an Aes Sedai, and it makes total sense. That falls within the existing timeline.
Yeah, but it's not the only future, because Morghese is queen in that vision, which is totally not what actually happens after the last battle.
Right, yeah. But at this point, it is a potential future.
Right.
So.
All right, yeah, I'll buy that.
So I think it's pulling from the pattern and the thread and Tel'aran Riyadh and showing a potential future. And then it's doing from Nynaeve's subconscious is pulling out her fears. But because it's based in Tel'aran Riyadh, it's actually, the dream shards are actually pulling from reality to create these bubbles.
Yeah, but why Sharina? Why is she important? It's such long foreshadowing, and then I never see where it goes.
Yeah, it's nuts, because we don't see her again until, like, deep into the Saladar stuff. She doesn't even show up until, like, later into the Saladar stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily important.
I'm not sure what book that is, but it's way out there. And she's not even really important in the series. I mean, she's not a huge character.
But she is, like,
she's a
as
cool
powerful
character.
as Nynaeve.
Yeah.
She has an incredible amount of potential. Isn't she a healer?
And as a novice, she's talented in healing. And as a novice, she reshapes the way novices are trained, because she's a great grandmother, I think.
And she's aging in reverse with the whole, like, because she's so strong and, like, the wrinkles are going away from her eyes.
Oh, I have forgotten
maybe she
that.
could end up living. Yeah, maybe she's going to end up being, like, a really powerful and really long-lived Aes Sedai, and, like, will end up, like, being Amyrlin in, like, 400 years or something like that.
I could see her being Amyrlin in, like, 10 years. Cat Swain doesn't want to be Amyrlin.
And she's already, like, 400 some odd. She's old.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cat Swain's not going to be a long-lived Amyrlin.
Well,
There's no
she
way.
needs to retire into the camp.
Basically.
But I could definitely see her taking over. very quickly with their organizational skills and with the fact that even though it's changing by the time the last battle comes around, so much of obedience in the White Tower is based off pure raw power. And if she's that powerful, there's going to be a lot of people who, are, once she's raised to the shawl, are going to want to obey her instinctually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That plus all these new novices are going to be in awe of her. If I had a vote for who I think would become Amerlin after Codswain,
After Codswain
it would
retires for the fifth time? Is it will it be the fifth?
No,
Okay.
Poor Codswain.
well, and if she retires into the kin, she'll live another 400 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless she's too much of a traditionalist to give up the oaths, which I could totally see. But maybe not. She could be badass.
But like, it doesn't make sense not to give up the oaths because, like, if you're gonna die, you're not going to be useful to anyone. At least as a kin, you know, you have different responsibilities.
Sure, you could still have a function in society.
Yeah, it's either Lelaine or Ramonda who's like, fuck that, I'm dying as Aes Sedai. Like, that's how it is.
Well,
one of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically the same. But
yeah, so I could, yeah, right. So I could see Codswain taking a similar path, but at the same time I couldn't because she's like so independent. So yeah, she's probably going to live like a few years.
She's got the Terran Grial that she uses.
I'm nodding.
She just does whatever the fuck she wants. And
that's exactly what I was going to say. What the fuck she wants.
If she saw an advantage in living another 400 years, and I think she would, because she just wouldn't want to die, she would totally go into the kin.
Yeah, I think she would. And then she'd still dominate, even if she was one of the youngest, it wouldn't even matter.
Right. It's like, as long as Soralia doesn't show up.
Yeah, basically.
But on that note, the next highlight that I have is Shiriam talking about when Aes Sedai were not required to swear oaths.
Which I thought was really interesting, because Black Aja alert!
Yeah, I had... Oh, yeah, Shiriam. But I had forgotten this little part. She mentions between the Trolloc Wars and the War of the 100 Years, we made these choices to use the Oath Rod to bind everyone to these tenets.
And it's sold as like the White Tower would not be standing if we hadn't done that, which is so propaganda flavored. So propaganda flavored.
It really is.
That's a great
because they
phrase.
stood for a solid 1,000 years, maybe 1,500 years after the breaking.
And people have to go for training somewhere.
Right? Interesting.
But
definitely the Trolloc Wars and the War of the 100 Years were both very tumultuous, dark influenced times. So.
Well, that's when Ishmael was out. You know, he was driving events during those two periods of times.
Yeah.
Towards chaos.
Plus, we have a dark friend telling us the story, so that's extra dark.
Right. Yeah, you know, I do take a lot of what Shiriam says at face value, even though she's a dark friend, simply because she really has no reason to lie. She would convey that information as any other normal Aes Sedai would do. You know, I think that's the hardest part about some of these Black Aja and dark friends, is most of the time they act exactly the way they would if they weren't Black Aja. And
right.
They're not lying all the time.
Like Varen.
Yeah, and also I was thinking, Shiriam, like, she's a really good Mistress of Novices. Like, and she joined the Black Aja for political reasons. Like, there's so much of her life that doesn't have to be influenced by, like, the dark objective.
We can even say there are some Aes Sedai that are probably worse than Black Aja members like Varen and Shiriam. Elida's not Black Aja. She's like the worst thing ever for the tower.
Horrible!
She's pretty atrocious. But, you know, there's individual acts of evil and cruelty, I think, that you kind of have to do to be in the Black Aja. I'm guessing there's some murder and some torture that occurs simply as initiation rites. That, you know, you're gonna have a hard time claiming anyone in the Black Aja is a good person in any way, shape, or form, simply because they probably tortured and killed somebody.
Maybe.
But still, Shiriam's just so good at, like, comforting the novices and, like, doing all of her, like, Mistress of Novices, like, duties, like, in a really positive way that we see.
I think that's what makes her betrayal such a deep cut.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's there because you're really vulnerable moments. And she's, like, catching these women and saying, it's okay, you're going to be okay. If you're badass enough, like, you're going to be okay. Like,
that's a good point.
It's hard to have that person be like, actually, I'm working for the enemy, just by the way.
When I found out about Shiriam, it was definitely one of those moments where I like put the book down and just like sighed heavily. Oh, not you. Not you.
Yeah. I'm nodding.
She really is one of the few Aes Sedai where I was really like, oh man, she's black. That sucks.
Yeah.
Varen, that's a whole different, like, Varen, that's badass, right?
With Leandrin, it's like, of course you are.
Yeah, and then there's just like the bad, the 13 that leave with Leandrin are just like the bad Aja, Aes Sedai. But it's the ones who get close, who you think are your friends, who you think are trying to help, who turn out to be traitors. That's the worst.
Yeah, and they trust her so implicitly for so long. You're like, yes, I can clearly trust this woman. And then she betrays you, and it's like, nope, we're back to the Supergirls. That's it. Everybody else is suspect.
Well, and she is such a vital part of the Black Aja recruiting machine, too. That's the other thing. No matter how nice she is, I guarantee she's the one who's steering these novices and accepted towards the Black Aja and picking them out and informing her superiors which ones are susceptible to being recruited.
Yeah. Yeah, she's horrible. So awful.
All right, let's reel this back in.
I noticed there was a couple of information dumps about Terangrial, what they are and what they do, as well as on the Three Oaths. Is this the first time we get a list of the Three Oaths pull out, or does Moraine give it to us earlier?
I think so. I think this is the first full one, or it's the second one, but I think it's the first.
I think so too.
At least where they're all in one place. To speak no word that is not true, to make no weapon for one man to kill another, and never to use the one power as a weapon except against dark friends or shadow spawn, or in the last extreme of defending your own life, that of your warder, or that of another sister.
But not another sister's warder. Those, you gotta let go.
And nobody else. You can't defend innocence.
And what about weapons for women to kill each other? This is an army of women. Can you make weapons for them? Probably not.
That is a lot of loopholes.
Well, that's where a man, is short probably for mankind, which is a problem with the language, but...
I actually thought it was interesting that other sisters as warders were not covered by that. Now you got to deal with that heartbreak on your own. Sorry, I couldn't say them.
That's a good point.
You could extend it in a lot of ways too. In defense of a sister, well, what if it's in defense of the White Tower? Is that not in defense of all sisters?
Right.
You can just extend this kind of infinitely.
And we see a lot of them do mental gymnastics to get around the oath against lying. So it seems like they could do a little bit more to do some mental gymnastics around the third oath.
Yeah, I'm with Nynaeve. It's either too much or too little to be swearing. Which probably means it's just right, like Goldilocks oath.
Well, I'm convinced that it's a function of the black, motivated by the black. So I'm not sure that it is helpful.
Well, especially just doing them once. If the Dark One can undo it if you just swear to the Dark One, then what good?
Well, I think you actually have to get the oath rod to unswear the oaths.
Do you?
Yeah. I think the Black Aja just has access to the oath rod. And they just, they have their own ceremony, take the oath rod, get people to unswear the three oaths, and then re-swear the three oaths to the black. Because there is scenes where they talk about re-swearing oaths to the Dark One on the oath rod.
On the oath rod?
Absolutely, it's on the oath rod. Yeah.
Oh.
But then later we also see the other oath rod with Galena in the Aiel camp, and she wonders if she could use it to free herself from oaths. Or if you could release yourself from oaths with a different binder. And we never get an answer to that question, but it is raised.
Right. I always assumed the answer was yes, but I had no evidence for that, other than you channel into it and you say, I am releasing myself from all oaths, or I forswear all oaths. And it seems like that would be all oaths, no matter which oath rod it's sworn on.
Yeah, it seems like
that's what it would seem to me. It's not all oaths that I swore on this oath rod, or...
It's just we know so little about where the binders really came from in the first place that it's all supposition.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely know that they were...
They were for prisoners, right?
Prisoners,
not for prisoners, but for convicted criminals, I should say.
Definitely.
So that they wouldn't have to be...
And also so that their lifespan would be shortened. And it was obviously only for channeling prisoners, because it doesn't work on non-channelers. For that, they had the binding chair, which is something different.
Right.
And that's not something we ever get any detail on other than a name, and that it was used to basically restrict non-channelers from committing crimes again. There is a chair we see that sort of that the sisters who are hunting dark friends use to torture somebody. Yeah, and I've definitely seen speculation that that is a binding chair, but they seem to have very different functions. One seems to be for making you face your own guilt, and the other one seems to be preventing you from doing certain acts.
Oh, right, I remember that.
And maybe there's like a way to use them together, or like there was some third type that like helped bring it all together, but yeah, we just don't see that because all we have is like fragments.
Right. And so she asks, what does this particular Terangrial does? And Chirium replies, we know what this one does. It will bring you face to face with your greatest fears.
She smiled pleasantly.
That, I think, is your best clue that she's a dark friend.
I don't know. I think the Aes Sedai in general have a certain amount of like, you have to suffer this much to enter our secret club situation.
Yeah, and her response later is kind of motherly, but we'll get to that.
This is definitely a initiation ritual. Like,
oh, yeah.
Going into a frat, you know?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And that then makes me wonder, how did they decide to use this Terangrial for this initiation? They have a whole other one for the shawl that does a whole other thing. Like, how did they decide that this is the test for acceptance? You know, like, how did they figure that out?
Yeah, I mean, she gives a little bit of story about when they were testing it, and the person who went in came out stilled. But that must have been after the breaking.
Right? Yeah, after they built the tower, presumably, and had a basement to put it in.
Of course.
I just imagine a bunch of Aes Sedai sitting around getting drunk, being like, dude, go through the Terangrial. It shows you your spheres. And they'll be like, no! And be like, I dare you. And then, like, them all doing it as a group and being like, and then having that expand out and be like, well, you're not a real Aes Sedai if you haven't gone through the thing and faced your fears.
Oh my god. That's probably exactly what happened.
It does seem like there could be a better way to do this.
Yeah. And I imagine that some of those who were urging them on were Black Aja the whole time, being like, hey, maybe if some of them die during the testing, we'll have fewer Aes Sedai to deal with.
But, like, what did they do before, Like, I mean, Aes Sedai didn't just, like, self-declare. Like, they had to have had some kind of process for becoming Aes Sedai, and then they, like, decide that this is their, like, stopgap now that it's, like, post-Age of Legends.
Well,
like...
pre-Age of Legends, there was definitely, like, universities where people went and got trained and had specialties and did studies. There was that floating,
the Column Dawn.
The Column Dawn.
Right.
And that was a university. And then I think after the breaking, there were just a bunch of Aes Sedai, like, wandering around, forming different groups, and it wasn't until they came together
long after.
Yeah, and formed the White Tower.
The White Tower was one of the groups.
Yeah.
It was the one that eventually succeeded in conquering the others. I don't think we know anything about what happened before, or if there was anything to bond Aes Sedai other than the title and that they should serve the community. And I mean, the Age of Legends had all sorts of other things to bind people to basically do good.
And if you think about it, the Aes Sedai that were alive during the breaking, most of them probably lived 500, 600, 700 years after the breaking, because that was before the Oath Rod. So there was plenty of time for them to wander for a while, gather together, form a group, and then combine back into the White Tower.
Yeah.
And then they would have been like, oh, we're all dying out. Like, we need a way to verify that we have, like, real Aes Sedai joining our ranks. So we'll just experiment with Terangrial till we find a good winnowing test for them.
I mean, certainly there were Aes Sedai who studied Terangrial. So I'm guessing this one was studied and they, like, had it sitting in the background. And they would be like, yeah, that's the one that shows you your fears. Maybe we should make that a test.
Man, who was the first batch of accepted to, like, graduate out of that?
I could even see that being, like, maybe they just had novices and then Aes Sedai, and this was, like, they sort of established this in-between thing where they're like, well, we don't want to raise you to a full sister yet, but we need you to be more than a novice. So this could have been, I can see where maybe they had the Aes Sedai test first, and this came along later to sort of split the novices into two groups.
Yeah. Because, yeah, we had no idea how Aes Sedai were raised before the breaking, like, at all.
No. It looks like most information Well, a lot of this important information was lost by the time the White Tower was built. I just looked it up, and it says 202 after breaking, and the breaking lasted somewhere around 300 years, if I remember right. It was a really long period of time. So,
well, again, some of the male channelers were living in Steading for a while.
Yeah.
And they came out hundreds of years later. And, for a while, there were probably new male channelers popping up and being taught.
Well, of course, there still are.
Not being
Right.
taught. Well, we assume that some of the population has been culled, the channeling population.
When now?
Now, as compared to then.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So Shiriam sort of gives the rules of the test. She says if you stop now, before we start, I can still make you a novice. Like, we can just pretend that we never came down here at all.
Right.
And then she gives her a couple of pieces of information, and then if she turns away, she gets one of 3 strikes against her. And then once she starts, if she turns away, she's put out of the tower.
With enough silver to support you for a year, you will never be allowed back.
Which is where a lot of the kin actually come from. Because once they're put out, they're like, well, I don't know what to do now, but I can kind of channel. I guess and I can't go back to the White Tower. I guess I'll go join this other group. And I think that...
we find out later that the White Tower knows about the kin the whole time.
Totally. Well,
they think they know about the
they
kid.
know the kin exists, but they don't know a lot of the details they thought they knew. Because they don't know how old the kin were living. They don't know the numbers of the kin. They thought the kin was much smaller than it actually is.
Isn't the oldest one like 600 or something? Oh, no, that's Olivia. That's not the kin.
Mm-hmm. But they do have people in that range.
Yeah, getting up there.
So that was the first thing that Shiriam said. The second was, to seek, to strive, is to know danger. You will know danger here. Some women have entered and never come out. When the Terangriel was allowed to grow quiet, they were not there. And they were never see again. If you will survive, you must be steadfast.
And so that question is, do a lot of them, obviously some of them could face a danger that kills them. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
But there could also be some that find a future like the one Nynaeve finds in her 3rd vision that they think is just wonderful. And they end up just staying in an alternate world and living out that life.
It looks like later, if Nynaeve wasn't so powerful, she would have been stuck there and probably happy about it. Assuming you stay alive.
Right, you see her getting memories that didn't exist, but they're forming in her mind, as she contemplates staying.
Yeah.
Which implies that it's a fully fleshed reality. Though I do wonder if once they powered down the Terangrial, if it would all get wispy and blow away and she would be stuck in some sort of limbo.
Maybe.
Or something.
Maybe not. Maybe the 3rd Terangriel was like a vacation in the Age of Legends. You could just go live a fantasy that you have for a while.
I don't think so.
Certainly, the only thing that's difficult about it is that she has to leave.
Well, that is the test.
Well, she has to know that she's leaving everyone behind. She's leaving Rand and Egwene and everyone to deal with the real world while she has happy fun times with Land.
Yeah.
That's pretty weak.
Sure. I would have a hard time passing it up.
I understand the temptation.
Right?
I have had fun times.
Yeah, I'd be screw your world.
A perfectly designed fantasy life? I have to give that to some consideration.
Though I do wonder, if does time flow differently there? Could you have a few decades of a vacation there in say a weekend on this side, or is it a 1-to-1 pace of time?
Who knows? It does seem like things are happening actually slower over there, because she doesn't seem like she's over there for that long, and yet people come and go from the chambers. I feel like it takes hours and hours and hours for her to take the test.
Yeah, the Armerlin has to be there at the end, but she's not there at the beginning.
Right.
So that does imply time.
Exactly. So it seems like time is passing much quicker outside the Terangrial than inside it.
I never noticed that.
Like the Matrix, you can be traumatized in 30 seconds.
There was a what was that Twilight Zone remake?
The Outer Limits?
The Outer Limits, yes.
There were 2 of those also, an older one and a newer one.
All I remember is in the one I'm thinking of, Niles Crane, the guy who plays Niles Crane, is the main character. And he goes into an alternate reality and experiences... it's basically a punishment for criminals. It's almost exactly taken out of the Wheel of Time.
Like the episode of the Black Mirror, what's it called? The White Bear?
A white bear. Oh, God, that was fucked
It's
up.
a really fucked up episode. That's basically what you just described, where a criminal is made to live this terrible experience over and over to, like, punish her.
This is one where he just lives his whole life as a criminal, and then, like, when he dies, he pops out of the VR.
He pops out of
I think there's a Deep Space Nine Star Trek episode that had a very similar plotline,
Where it's
too.
like only an hour has passed in the real world, but he's lived a whole life and been punished.
Yeah.
And basically lived a life sentence.
Oh, geez, yeah. There's another episode of the Black Mirror that does the same thing, basically.
And
It's a very common, familiar trope, I think.
but I could see them having like a Terran Real like that, where they push you through and you live your whole life, and it's miserable and awful, and you come out the other side, and they're like, "Well, it's been an hour. How was that?" And you're like, "Oh my God, I never want that to happen again."
And in the group in the Portal world, they lived a bunch of...
But with all these warnings, Nynaeve decides to do it anyway.
She has to make Moraine pay for what she has done to him.
Yeah.
Revenge is a big part of
So many reasons.
Yeah.
So many reasons, but only Moraine is in italics.
Well, I often wonder if she's lying to herself a little bit, because she not very quickly, but she eventually figures out that what Moraine does was certainly a benefit. And she sort of holds on to this irrational anger, even when she's sort of talked to herself and said, yeah, I mean, she couldn't have done anything else.
I mean, the Trollocs would have fucked everything up way worse.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's not Moraine who's doing it, it's the world, and Moraine is just sort of a symptom.
Yeah, and Nynaeve's really good at self-deception. Like, she's probably better than any other character at self-deception, aside from, like, maybe Rand.
And the ceremony commences, and this is the same with the Aes Sedai raising, where the person has to strip. I always thought that was strange that you have to do all these tests naked.
Oh, yeah, glad in the net. So I had a thought about that. So all the women, every time they go through something really important and transformative like this, they have to get naked. Like the Aiel women, the Aes Sedai, like everybody has to get naked. None of the male characters have to do that. None of the male characters who go into some alternate reality or spirit quest or whatever, they never get stripped, deliberately or forcibly. And like on the one hand, it's kind of cool because it's like a birth, right? And they're like naked and they get doused in water and they're super vulnerable, and like that's cool. It's a good symbol of birth. But it's also like, why do the men never have to do that? Why is only the women having to take their clothes off? What's up with that, RJ?
It does seem like there are a lot more of these rituals for women. Like as far as the rituals for men, what do we got? The Aiel clan chief thing.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, not as many rituals for men. That's a fair point.
There's not really a ritual with being raised to soldier or dedicated or Ashaman. You're just sort of like, well, you're good enough. Here you go.
Yeah. Oh, you're still alive? Here.
Give them 100 years, they might develop. But yet the Aiel chiefs, we never see an Aiel chief go. Oh no, we do. Moradrin.
And Rand goes through it.
Yeah.
But they don't have to be naked.
Right. So only women are like, maybe it's because women are so powerful that they have to be stripped of their power because it's such like a matriarch. The one power is very like one-sided in this world. So like they have to like symbol a level of armor, whereas men are like, you're already like oppressed enough because Saidin is tainted. Like,
or maybe
whatever.
Jordan was thinking about the eventual TV series and doing us all a favor. Well, I mean, it worked for Game of Thrones. Why not show boobs?
I mean, the warders are always walking around shirtless. It just doesn't translate.
That's true. You can do a fair amount of, like...
It's not exactly the same.
Hot guys sword fighting shirtless. Rand and Lan up on the tower at the beginning of this book.
Yeah. Well...
A lot of training montages.
It doesn't translate, though.
No, it doesn't.
It's not the same.
Yeah, when the men take their shirts off, like, they're not in a vulnerable place. Like, they're practicing their physical badassery skills.
They're not facing.
Like, it's not very symbolic of their vulnerability. It's more was like, I need to move. And
They're trading protection for flexibility. They're not giving up protection for vulnerability.
Yeah.
exactly.
The first time, Shiriam said, is for what was. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. Nynaeve hesitated. Then she stepped forward, through the arch and into the glow. It surrounded her, as if the air itself were shining, as if she were drowning in light. The light was everywhere. The light was everything. Nynaeve gave a start when she realized she was naked, then stared in amazement. And it goes on to describe her standing in this bizarre maze made out of stone.
So I sort of pictured this whole thing as a bit of an allegory for going through the ways and then coming out on the other side in the Blight and running into Agenor there. Now, I know the maze isn't probably an exact allegory there, but
kind of a way to sum up the experience that terrified her.
yeah. And we also see Rand in a similar maze in the dream world when he's confronting Ishmael.
That's true, also. Ishmael uses it. It's a good tool for terror.
Just being lost in a maze and not being able to control where you're going.
Yeah, not knowing what's in front of you. I kind of noted, or I wanted to note out loud that in this one and the second arch, Nynaeve forgets where she is. She doesn't know, but in the third one, she does. I just thought that was interesting. Because she forgets immediately here.
In the second one, she knows she's in the Two Rivers.
She has a moment where she has some memories, then they fade away, and then they come back.
Yeah. I guess I shouldn't say, it's not that she doesn't know where she is, it's that she doesn't know why she's there or is confused about whether or not it's real.
It seems like with each time she goes through the ring, she remembers a little bit more. It's almost like the first time she has no idea where she is, and the second time she sort of is like, this is a little weird, and the third time she has her full memories.
I mean, it occurred to me also that in the third ring, it may also be like part of the test that she knows that she could go back, but she has this idyllic world, and she has to choose in a really literal sense, you know?
So in this first one, she's going through the maze, and Agenor steps out behind her. He hurt her pretty bad at the end of the Eye of the World, didn't he?
Well, here's the funny thing, is that he is the one who speaks the threat of sexual violence to her, but it's Bathamal who's actually holding her physically. Which I thought was kind of interesting, that she goes to Agenor as like the bogeyman that is chasing her and like threatening her, because like he never actually touched her, but he's the one who spoke the threat in the Eye of
That is interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't catch that.
I was thinking maybe Thalmal is more of an instrument.
Yeah.
In the same way that like the Murdral are kind of an instrument of the Dark One when they rape and hurt people.
But Agenor is like if you're going to put a face to the threat, it makes more sense to use.
Plus, she saw Agenor's face.
Good point, yeah.
Right.
Thalmal's behind a mask. He was a masked, silent presence, and I could see where that would be. Even though it was holding you, you would concentrate on the person who was actually communicating with you.
Right. And it's interesting, too, that, like, we don't see Nynaeve as being very, like, vulnerable or, like, victimized in a sexual way, but that's, like, the very first fear that this Terangriel takes her to. Like, the very first, most baseline thing, which, like, I imagine most women can resonate with, but we never see that in her character, really, throughout the entire rest of the series. And she was a powerful woman in the Two Rivers, like, before she left, so she probably has never, but that's still the first thing she goes to.
That is interesting, but I mean...
It's sort of a baseline fear for all women in all times.
Sure, and when you live through one of the Forsaken threatening sexual violence against you, that's terrifying no matter who you are. I'd be terrified.
Yeah, like the literal bogeyman just threatened to rape you.
Right.
Like, holy crap.
Someone your mother has been telling you about since you were a kid.
And like only like a few months prior. Like, she hasn't really gotten to get over that in any real sense.
And it's easy to overlook just how much damage the Forsaken do to the women in that first book, because we're seeing it from Rand's point of view.
So he's busy with a few other things.
this Eye of the World thing and destroying an army and...
And I had another thought about the maze. Is the maze maybe represents like how confusing the world is as she's like getting out of the two rivers where she's like in control and she's on top of like the social order and she knows what's going on. And then she goes out and it's like every other page there's a new custom, a new land, a new monster to like figure out. So maybe that's part of like why the maze is the environment that she's in.
I like that too. And our Emmons Fielders have probably never been outside of the Two Rivers area ever before this.
No.
Ever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of everything that happened to her in the Eye of the World.
Yeah, very few brushstrokes, but very eloquent.
So she gets pretty pissed and starts channeling.
She runs a while and, slowly fear turned completely to anger.
Is maybe the reason that Nynaeve is able to channel has something to do with the fact that she can't channel normally during the real world. In the final scene when she channels with the blackberry bush, she doesn't appear to be angry.
That is a little interesting. But if we're in something that is at least a reflection of Teleran Riyadh, if Nynaeve can just force her considerable will upon it, then perhaps it's a bit easier than what it would be in the real world, Am I making sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah, or like maybe she's like able to like check her emotional baggage at the door in some respect and like just have her abilities like subject to her will and that's it.
And I was thinking that maybe because it's for what will come, in some ways it's happening in the future after her block is broken.
Sure.
Right, because her soul isn't blocked. It's just her current place in space and time with her mind that's blocked.
So in the future, she wouldn't have that block. And so that might be why she was able to embrace the power without getting angry.
Yeah, and Fate Gaiden here is kind of making the point I was thinking, where in Teleran Riyadh, channeling isn't really channeling. It can be, it cannot be. What you believe is real, or what you really, really want to be real can happen.
I've definitely had this debate where, in my head, where I'm like, are people Teleran Riyadh channeling, or do they just think they're channeling? And because they're convinced they're doing it, they're imposing their will on the world, and what's happening in the dream world looks a lot like channeling, but it's actually just 100% based in will.
That's kind of the point I'm trying to make. Like, at the end, when Perrin's fully developed, could he channel if he wanted to in the world of dreams? I mean, why not? He can do like anything. But why would he?
Right, he'd just be limited by his technical knowledge.
He would be limited by, he's not a channeler, so it's not very useful to him. But, he slaps balefire out of the air.
And when you're asleep, you can only channel spirit. You can't channel the 4 elemental powers. You can only channel spirit when you're actually
asleep. When you see these channelers, channeling spirit into this statue the whole time they're asleep, and then in the dream world they're like channeling all these other things. But it's not their physical body, it's their dream body.
Right, which is totally about their mental picture
Can we
of
come
themselves.
to the conclusion that all channeling in Teleran Riyadh is not real channeling? Is that a too big of a leap?
I would say yes, except that like we never have an example of a non-channeler channeling it, suddenly being able to channel or coming, the best evidence is Perrin slapping the weaves out of the air.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. Would someone be able to tap into the one power?
Really?
I mean, we don't see any non-channelers, I'm going to call it fake channeling in the world of dreams, but we do see, for instance, one of the Aiel Wise Ones turn her skin camouflage so that it reflects what's behind her.
Yeah,
we see things like that.
That's just with will. That has nothing to do with the one power.
Oh, sure. But I'm saying it looks like the one power.
Right.
You can do the same things.
Right. I think it's that you have to understand what channeling would mean in order to channel. So if you're not a channeler, you don't have that baseline information in your mind to work with.
So you wouldn't know what it would look like or how to do it.
Right. But like Perrin like summons walls and like makes spaces without air. I mean, he does all these things that are, if the effects of channeling could also have created that, but he does it just by creating the end product rather than going through the mechanics of channeling
But
to
he
make
can do
it
a lot of
happen.
things that you could never do with channeling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, like fly.
Stop.
So
Hellfire.
here's a thought experiment. If someone was drained of their ability to channel, or perhaps stilled, and then put into the world of dreams, so they have the knowledge, but not the ability anymore.
So, like, if a queen had been stilled, would she be able to enter the world of dreams and channel?
Does Suwon ever go into the world of dreams before she gets
definitely.
healed?
Lots.
Okay, so does
No.
she channel there?
But
That
she's
would've
also
been perfect.
convinced that she
But
can't
she
channel.
also, yeah,
If her self-image
yeah,
is someone who's
okay,
stilled,
yeah.
well, then she's stilled.
I feel
Yeah.
that it could be done. There's no reason it couldn't be done.
But if she was like stilled and her self-image was of someone who wasn't stilled,
Or she knew if she was an adept dreamer,
Right.
which she isn't.
What about like Lanfear? When she becomes Sindane, she has lesser
she does.
powers, like a
But
lesser
again, that all
strength
comes
and
back
power.
to
But
she
does that
perceives
influence?
herself as having less strength, and
Yeah.
so it's very hard to separate that self-perception from reality. You would have to have someone perceive themselves as different than they are in reality, in the way that like Perrin perceives himself as a wolf sometimes.
Right. Or a slayer can be either of his two souls.
Right.
And Slayer wants to channel,
Yeah.
right?
So that's, I mean,
His Luke personality wanted to channel, but he can't get that from the
Right.
Dark One.
and he doesn't, seem to be able to replicate those effects in Teleron Riyadh. And we do see that a shield works on the Black Aja when it's cast in the real world. It affects them in both the real world and in Teleron Riyadh.
So if you shield one in Teleran Riyadh, you can...
Yeah, and I don't think she necessarily knew she'd been shielded.
Well, and what happens to you in Teleran Riyadh happens in the real world. But not the...
Mhm.
Right. And I guess she did shield her in Teleron Riyadh. I'm
This is
going around.
complicated,
It's
guys.
complicated. It's one of those things where I don't know if anyone actually ever channels in Teleron Riyadh, or they just think they do.
I don't think we see it. Our best evidence is like some of what Perrin and Slayer can do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's something to watch as we go forward, for sure.
Yeah, if we can find anything, that would be really cool. So we see this exchange between Agenor and Nynaeve when she turns around and confronts him, and she throws a fireball, and he creates this storm and tries to strike her with lightning, and she turns the lightning back. And he's kind of in disbelief.
Well, she's channeling whatever he just channeled, which would definitely fuck with that character's sense of, I mean, even a fake version of Agenor would be like, you can't do that, that's my power.
How is she? I guess the quote I was looking at is this single heartbeat that sort of slows things way down. She felt the flow inside of her. Sidar came a distant thought, and felt the answering flow in the lightning, and she altered the direction of the flow. So she's altering the direction of the flow of the lightning, which is Sidene.
But okay, I can't prove this, but I gotta stick with that. In the world of dreams, Sidene is not Sidene. It's just a construct of your mind. Although, like right under that, the description of Nynaeve channeling Sidar, it's like perfect. This is what channelers feel like when they're channeling.
Yeah, I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, even if whether it's in their heads or whether it's real, we can assume it follows the rules of channeling.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it's more likely that in the world of dreams, Nynaeve should be able to move what should be Sidene that Agenor is channeling.
And
To manipulate.
I don't think it is Sidene.
No?
I think it's all Sidar because it's Sidar being fed into the Terangrial by the Aes Sedai on the outside. So I think everything created there is all made of Sidar.
It could be.
I always thought it was more in the world of dreams, and that the channeling was just sort of allowing the Terangrial to power the Dream Shard. But the Dream Shard, it's an alternate reality, and so it can have all sorts of, it could have Sidene in it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, let me read this description. I think this maybe shine a little light on it. Sidar was a torrent racing through her. She could feel the rocks around her and the air, feel the tiny flowing bits of the one power that suffused them and made them, and she could feel Agenor doing something as well. Dimly she felt it, and far distant, as if it were something she could never truly know. But around her she saw the effects, and knew them for what they were.
That does sound like Sidene, that she's somehow sensing through the magic of the dream shard.
It's so rare that we see a female channeler sense a male channeling.
Never, really.
Yeah. Now, this is early enough that maybe Jordan thought that there may be a way for women to sense channeling, and he decided to change that. Or it could also be just that she's sort of sensing what he's doing based on the effects. Not like a sixth sense, but just like, oh, well, if there's an explosion over there, that must mean he's channeling over there.
Right, and building up a lightning bolt is like, that's a lightning bolt. Like, that's not Sidene or Star,
Exactly.
that's lightning.
Exactly. It's an electrical difference. So she may be like using Sidene to detect the electrical buildup or the electrical charge.
Right, but she's still able to seriously affect what he's doing in a way that I don't think you'd see outside of a dream shard. So there's definitely some special rules applied somehow.
There's something different going on here.
Definitely. And everything he does, she turns around. This happens over and over. He raises a wind, he tries to crumble the walls, and more lightning, and everything he does, she turns back against him.
And so as he weakens and she's about to defeat him, the arch appears.
Something gleamed off to her right, something uncovered by the collapsing walls. Skipping a paragraph here. The silver arch stood where the stone had been, an arch filled with soft silver radiance. The way back. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast.
Yeah, the first sacrifice she has to make is for revenge. She can't pursue revenge.
Ooh, I didn't even see it that way. There's another thing I'm glad you pointed out, that what she's sacrificing is that she doesn't get to just beat him to death. That's what she wants, right? That's what she really wants here, and it's turning in her favor. And the reason she would ignore the arch now is so that she can kill him.
I thought of it as giving up safety. That to be an Aes Sedai, you are giving up your sense of safety. You're going to be hunted. You're never going to be able to be sure that you're going to be safe.
Yeah, sure.
That's another way to look at it.
Yeah, because she knows that he'll come back and get her if she doesn't defeat him now, and instead she has to turn her back on that and accept that risk and be like, well, I need to be Aes Sedai more than I need to be safe.
So that's what I saw this first.
Yeah, and she also steps into the arch being like, I'm going to make them wish they got what Agenor got. Like, there's definitely a revenge component that she's just having to set aside.
Yeah.
Like, don't be petty and don't be safe. Like, you need to go be in danger and be higher than that. Fascinating.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, the last paragraph here, with a cry of thwarted anger, she climbed over the tumbled stone toward the arch. Whoever's responsible for me being here, she muttered, I'll make them wish they had gotten what Agenor got.
And arguably that's her. She's responsible for being there.
It is her choice, that's true.
If she ever took responsibility for anything she did and didn't blame other people.
Shiriam is very clear, like, this is your decision. You don't have to do this. I think she says it like 3 times even. Are you sure you want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And she eventually comes back to blame it on Moraine. If it wasn't for Moraine, I would never have had to go into that stupid doorway.
I mean, I guess they could be a little more clear, like, listen, this is fucked up. You're gonna hate this. But
sign here.
Quick question. There are 3 sisters sitting around the Terran Grial. One's a red, I think one was a white, and one was a brown. I didn't see...
No, there's the red by the table.
Okay, that's right.
There's the red by the table, and then it's green, white, and gray at the intersections. I was looking this up because I was trying to find patterns in it.
Yeah, so I also looked it up, and I didn't find anything. Did you...
Yeah, I want to say that the red is Elida, but we don't actually get anything other than that she's swarthy, and, like, she's really the only red that we see for, like, books and books
Elida's
and books.
pale, isn't she?
Yeah, I wouldn't think of Elida as swarthy.
Really? Oh, I'm horrible with facial details in books, so
I don't always remember.
Delete all.
It took me a long time in some cases to realize that, like, some characters or I have been imagining them wrong the whole time, you know.
Because Elida's always described as handsome, not pretty. And swarthy to me is more of a... I don't even know. How would you describe someone who's swarthy?
Someone, like, in the middle, like, I would describe, like, my Greek cousins as, I guess, kind of swarthy, like dark hair, dark eyes, and olivey skin. Not like dark, but somewhere in the mid spectrum.
But that has no relevance to handsome, not handsome.
Oh yeah, no. It's more about coloration.
And then we don't get names for any of the Aes Sedai at all. Like, I read the chapter so thoroughly, and it's like, nah, they're just random. But I did notice there's no yellow Aes Sedai in this. Not until the end when all 7 are represented in the
Yeah, but I'm guessing it's just, they only need 3. You're going to eliminate some of the Ajas.
But then we've also got red at the table, and then we've got Shiriam is blue. I mean, she's black, but, like, she's blue in this moment. So we've got everybody except for yellow represented at the beginning of the ceremony.
Interesting.
Which is Nynaeve's eventual Aja.
Right, which, like, obviously they don't know that, but, like, we know that, and, like, Nynaeve probably already basically knows that.
Well, and they should know what her skill is, right? They know that she was a healer, and that that's her trick as a wilder. That's why they're willing to give her the accepted test, because she is so skilled with the healing.
Yeah. I thought that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
It could have been, and we do know that Moraine told Suan everything, and Suan told Shiriam everything.
And Shiriam told Black Aja everything.
Yeah. It's likely that everyone in the room knows Nynaeve's tricks. Whatever her wilder tricks were, I'm air quoting.
I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
I would think it's fairly common knowledge. I mean, she would be the gossip, the super powerful wilder brought in.
Yeah.
And given the accepted test, everyone would be like, well, why? And they'd be like, well, she can heal.
As I was reading this last night, I started looking at the information I could find on Nynaeve, and Nynaeve's Aes Sedai raising one of each Aja is present, and they're all sitters because of the way she's regarded. It's assumed that the most important women wanted to be there.
Which reminds me, Nynaeve's the only woman character who we see go through both tests, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Every other woman, we either see neither of their tests or we just see one. We don't see
That's
both.
A good point.
But Nynaeve, we get to see both. We get to see her process from, like, wide-eyed village girl to, like, Queen of the Valkyrie, second only to the Amerlin in strength. Like, all of that.
She never takes the Aes Sedai test.
No, she doesn't. Now, her beating Masana is, like, her equivalent. That whole battle in the White Tower is very much, like, the closest she ever gets to that.
So she makes it back from her first time through, and she asks whether or not it's real.
No one knows, Shiriam replied. It seems to be real in memory, and some have come out bearing the actual wounds of hurts taken inside. Others have been cut to the bone inside and come back out without a mark.
And that reminds me of a dream shard.
Yeah. It definitely happens to... Is it Rand that comes out with the splinter in his hand?
Yeah, there's the little sword from the figurine.
And then he, like, pulls it out and it vanishes, but the wound's still there.
Mm-hmm. And when he's holding the sword that Ishmael heats, it only brands that little section of his hand. It should, like, rip his whole palm off if that whole sword is that hot.
So we see definitely selective damage, selective wounds.
Which is so weird. It's, like, inconsistently selected. Like, how does that even work? Like, your mind chooses what injuries you need to, like, take with you to, like, remember. Like, I don't know. It's very strange to me.
The creator of the dream shard. In this case, maybe the Terangriel decides.
Or your subconscious, since this does seem to be in your subconscious. It's like, what sort of punishment do you deserve? What sort of pain do you have to go through?
The thorns are Nynaeve's idea.
Yeah, they're totally in her head. There's no physical manifestation of the thorns.
No.
But Shiriam pulls thorns out of her palm.
Yeah.
Right, but in the actual dream world, there are no.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's just as she comes out. She totally just thinks of the was it blackthorn bush?
Yeah, I imagine it's a blackberry bush. That's the way I always imagine it. A blossoming blackberry bush. The pink flowers. They're pretty.
God, those thorns can get long. Not long enough to go through your palm, though. At least not the ones I've experienced.
I've seen them.
They can get pretty crazy. I've tried to cut down some canes before and, like, pick up the, like, bushels of blackberry canes. And I wore 2 pairs of gloves, I remember, and I still got stabbed.
Oh yeah, I've listened to these books so many times, specifically while destroying blackberries. Like, it fits very well. I destroyed acres of blackberries to these books.
I mean, they're nasty.
Oh yeah, it's good for your body. You will give blood if you want to clear land for those guys.
Literally.
So Nynaeve says she's channels, and Shiriam's like, you shouldn't even be able to remember being able to channel. I just thought it was funny, like, she never says you shouldn't be able to channel, but you shouldn't be able to remember how. And I wonder if maybe Nynaeve, just because it's so instinctual to her, is able to channel naturally.
That was one of the things I wanted to attribute to either her muley Manetherin, blood of Manetherin will, or to Nynaeve's overpowering personality herself, or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see her break the test for Aes Sedai after she has experience in the dream world, so this could be kind of her just, like, ruthlessly punching it in the face and being like, no, I have a strong will even when I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm still really strong-willed. So I'd go with Manetherin. I'd go with the blood of Manetherin, for sure, with that one. I think it's interesting that she gets washed clean of sins when she first steps out of the arches.
Yeah.
Like, I was paying attention to, like, the pairings of that, and it's like, had she been raped, or say, had she been a sadistic motherfucker and, like, raped somebody else, like, that would have been, like, washed clean by that, because, like, she doesn't actually have sins committed against her. Like, she defends herself. But, like, it could have gone another way. Like, she might have not been able to defend herself.
Or, like, in her rage, tortured and killed Agenor or something.
Yeah, so I was thinking maybe this arch is for, like, getting into, like, your deepest, most, like, the reptilian part of your brain, right? And being like, here's your deepest fear or, like, your deepest personality flaw, and you get to, like, express that, and then we're just going to wash it clean and, like, set it aside, and now you've purged that, like, out of your psyche, and you maybe won't bring that into your career as an Aes Sedai.
Well, it's sort of like the second test, the sin of abandoning her village.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the sin I imagine they're washing clean. That's the idea that you have to give up or abandon or, do something against your will to return. And in a lot of cases...
Well, but for round two, she gets washed clean of false pride and false ambition. She's washed clean of sins on round one.
Interesting.
I feel like there's got to be some really profound, like, reasons why they chose these ritual words for each particular edition of Passing Through the Ring.
Sin is for the past.
Pride is
What's the third one again?
Well, that's just Swan dumping the water over her and saying, you're bound to us now, right?
You are washed clean of all ties that bind you to the world. You come
right,
to us washed clean in heart and soul.
So first it's sin, then it's pride, and then it's the ties that bind. So they're basically like taking you and turning you inside out and fluffing you out and then putting you back together. And saying, now you're fresh and ready to go.
What the Red Sister says here after the first one is relevant. She says, wash clean of what sin you may have done and of those done against you. Clean of what crime you have committed and those committed against you. So it's either one. It could have gone either way, potentially.
Yeah. Because, if she killed Agenor, that would be like, oh, you committed murder, or, like, whatever. Yeah. And that would be
I sort of imagine Nynaeve's revenge would have been worse than just murdering him.
Probably.
And the concept of sin I find very interesting in The Wheel of Time.
It's not something we hear about very much.
No, that's not a huge...
Do we see that word used?
It's not defined necessarily in the same way that it is in a modern Christian society.
Well, no.
Yeah, we don't really see a lot of talk of sin, so that's like a very archaic term, maybe, that's like holding over from like the Age of Legends.
I'm nodding.
Or just, it's not...
Give a head nod to that.
Because they don't really have much of a religion or a moral code. There's just like the light and being a good person.
Yeah.
A sin could just be anything that's, in the same meaning, a murder. It could just be a common usage type thing. So shall we talk about the second time? She's like, I won't channel if I can remember not to.
The second time is for what is.
Most people can't remember how to, but she can't remember how not to.
Yeah.
So talented. So talented.
Because she's got, she has this block in place, and maybe because her memories are taken away a little bit, she can't remember that she has the block. Does that make sense? I wonder if any other Wilder has been put into this test.
I don't think so.
Before being trained. No one's been, because they've all been trained by the White Tower for a while.
She's the first
she's the first one to ever just walk.
So I wonder if her ability to channel has something to do with the fact that she's a wilder and not really conscious of her ability to channel.
I would think so. She really doesn't know what she's doing, so we don't know what she's doing. Like in that scene with Agenor, even if the channeling was real, we don't know what she does with the lightning, or if she's powerful enough that she creates a weave that can sense Sidene being channeled. Like it could all be. I mean, she creates a new weave for healing.
Yeah,
And she doesn't know what she's doing, so it's all from her perspective.
and even her normal style of healing is like it uses like fire and earth, and you're not supposed to do that, and like blah 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 blah. And she's like, but that's how I do it. Like it works.
It's better this way.
We do know that the Aes Sedai have rough battlefield medic skills. Like that's like their entire concept of healing is like first aid on the battlefield. Is like
that's the only thing.
I remember like one of the Forsaken are like, that is so childish and so cute. So, and Nynaeve must be tapping into something more like holistic and complex, like with her just innate
It'd be
skill.
like a modern doctor, like going back to battlefield and seeing people with like hacksaws and like bandages and no antibiotics and no pain medication, being like, yeah, I mean, I guess technically that's medicine. I don't want you to treat me.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So this time Nynaeve heads in and she is actually wearing a dress. She doesn't pop up naked.
Just a plain peasant dress. It's just a peasant dress.
Which makes me think the fact she was naked in the first one has nothing to do with the fact that she entered the rings naked, but was just part of the test.
Probably.
Reflective of her psychological state. Like, I have nothing. I've got something. I've got very little, but it's something.
She's surprised that she's wearing it, and then she forgets why she was surprised.
So she sort of has that a little bit of memory of like, hey, wasn't I naked a second ago? And then it's like, well, no, of course I wasn't.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like the rings are really working on Nynaeve in the way that they're intended to work on everyone else.
The forgetfulness doesn't seem to be instant the way you would expect it to be.
Right.
And it seems to take a little bit longer with each passage through.
But she walks through the Terangriel and she's in Emmons Field.
A version of Emmons Field that's busted and broken down.
A possible ramshackle future.
Which I thought was interesting because she's happy to be home, which is like, bad Aes Sedai, you shouldn't be happy to be home. And then she notices how neglected it is, and it's like, bad wisdom, how dare you leave?
Yeah.
This is very much the crossroads of like her responsibility.
Like she's abandoned both responsibilities.
Right.
And the new wisdom is this evil wisdom who poisons children and it's like holding everyone...
Murders for political...
Yeah, exactly. It's holding everyone captive here.
Big bully.
And it seems really dire.
And her name is Mal. Like Mal. Like bad. Like malevolent. Thought that was interesting. Do we know if this is a real character? Malena Alar?
Never see her
is she
outside
real?
of this Terangriel.
Okay.
Right, and she's from Watch Hill, and we never really interact with Watch Hill. Like, it gets burned to the ground. It's like the end of our experience with Watch Hill. Right, but I wonder if this is more like a bogeyman in Nynaeve's mind of, like what would come after me in the position of wisdom. And also, it's like, Nynaeve is a total bully. Like, when she was with him, she's walking around with a stick, threatening to, like, hit people if they don't agree with her. Like, how is that really any different? You know? I mean, she wasn't poisoning children, so obviously there's a difference. But, like, it's interesting that it's like, yeah, you're kind of like that, you know?
A worse version of herself, basically.
Yeah, with none of the redeeming qualities. The Sven Bui likes Malena, which is kind of weird. Well, it doesn't like, he works with her.
He sees her as a source of power.
He sees Nynaeve and reports to Malena that Nynaeve is there. Maren Elvir is cowering and freaking out. She thinks that her children will be killed.
Which they probably will be. I mean, this woman is evil. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's super obvious to Nynaeve.
Right.
Well, I think it should be obvious to everyone. Like, Maren Elvir is a smart person in the real world. But, like, maybe Nynaeve, like, sees the village as a little bit more simple-minded than they really are, and that's why, like, they're letting Malena get away with all this really awful, blatant
I think that's the purpose of the test. The only one that can save them is her, at least in the test, in this fake world.
Oh, okay.
That it creates the situation where she is necessary.
Yeah, and Maren Elvir even says, like, if I can get enough of the women's circle to help get Milena out of here, will you come back and be wisdom? She's like begging her, please come save us, you know.
Right. Yeah, which is just like, there's plenty of capable women in the Two Rivers. Like, you don't need Nynaeve
Right.
Beginning.
Yeah, this would never actually happen. But in the same way, she would never be trapped in a maze with Agenor.
And nobody beats Elsbeth Luhan in a fight.
No.
Come on.
No.
She
no.
kills a Trolloc with a frying pan in the books.
Yes.
Yeah.
A frying pan.
Well,
Yeah.
Doesn't she beat a Trolloc
Yeah.
I
to
think
death?
that's in the Eye of the World when they invade.
Is it?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But...
Winter Night.
Okay.
Yeah, and also in Shadow Rising, when the Two Rivers is being invaded, like, she's in the vanguard of women who, like, have, like, their, like, butcher knives and pans and pitchforks, and they're gonna, like, be the last line of defense before the children and the Tinkers
That's right,
get
because
attacked.
the White
Like, all but
Cloaks
definite.
don't step in. So the women are like, oh, once we saw the White Cloaks weren't going to do their duty, we stepped up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's there twice with, like, blunt instruments, just being like, no. No.
Well, and she's as big as her husband, who's huge. It's like parent-sized. I mean, this is a big, big woman.
Yeah.
But, you know, just because you're big doesn't mean a bully can't get in your face.
Sure.
Some of the biggest bullies I've seen are little dudes.
That's a good point.
Or little dogs.
Yeah, oh god, little tiny dog. Like, I'll fight you, I'll
They
fight
freak
you.
me out. You don't know what they're gonna do. They're
Right?
crazy.
I think that's a little bit about what being a bully is like you play on people's fear and uncertainty. You don't know what I'm going to do. I might hit you with a stick. No, people wouldn't hit you with a stick, but I might do it, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like, why? Why would you do that? Okay, fine. I'll do what you say. Because you give bullies power.
Mm-hmm.
Things rarely come to blows.
So there's this back and forth. There's this horrible story about Neela and Hate and their children dying, and then
Yeah.
Hate killing himself over guilt because the wife was blaming him for their death.
It's a
horrible
really
story.
dark little story.
Yeah.
But Nynaeve remembers at the end, she has the thought that this isn't real, and she's able to run through the archway.
But it hurts. It hurts her so bad to listen to Marin.
Marin's shriek hounded her. For the love of the light, Nynaeve,
Oh.
help me.
Listening to that on audiobooks is a tough moment.
Ugh.
That's always a moment where I have
Oh,
to
God.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's a sad one. Kate Redding does a really good job making
She
you
really
feel that one.
does. Okay, there's definitely phrases in the books that I hear in Kate Redding's voice or Michael Kramer's voice.
Yeah,
There's one
absolutely.
earlier where Shurima says, and they were not there. And like I can't that
Yeah. Yeah.
that phrase like I hear in Kate Redding's voice every time I read it. And just her in it. And sometimes I'll hear Patrick reading and I'm like, no, you're not reading it the way they do. In this particular cadence.
Oh, so much nodding. So much nodding. Or you could clip in like pronunciations. Be like, if you can't agree on a pronunciation, you could do that. That would be
Oh,
And we
fine.
do
God.
use them as our pronunciation Bible.
Grab all
pretty
the
much.
different pronunciations from Mogedion that Kate Redding comes up with. And
Oh,
Oh my god. Mogedion.
I guess it's just two, but
Kyrian, the Kyrian.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. God.
no, it's
Or the first few times she says Moraine, it's like Moiraine, and it's like, what? Who is this Moiraine character you're talking about?
especially when you go back and listen to the earlier ones after listening to all the rest of them when they're like consistent for the last 11, and then you go back and listen to like Eye of the World, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
what? Whatever.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
cute. It's so cute.
What I really love about the old Eye of the World audio recording is it's like it's still kind of built for tape.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like when they first read the Eye of the World, there was no CDs, there were no MP3s, it was on tapes.
Right.
And
But what does that mean?
well, it's just the quality is a little bit different. There's like odd breaks sometimes where they like repeat
Oh.
a phrase. They like repeat the last sentence between the end of the last tape and the beginning of the next one.
Please eject your cassette and turn to the other side.
You can almost hear that like in there somewhere.
Yeah, that actually gets corrected with the new versions. The newer, I downloaded them again in a non-broken up version, and they fixed
Oh,
that
good.
in those audio.
But you're right, that's probably what it
But
was.
yeah, but yeah, Yeah, and you can hear like the warmness of like the analog tape, and you can hear that there's some mistakes that they're like, now we're not going to recut that or splice it. Like it was too small of an error. Like it was a good take. We're just going to roll with it, and the error's fine. Whereas in the later books, they can like edit out like half syllables, right, and make it sound perfect.
I'm going to read the next paragraph. March us forward. Staring, Nynaeve staggered out of the arch, barely aware of the chamber or the Aes Sedai. Marin's last cry still rang in her ears. You are washed clean of false pride. You are washed clean of false ambition. You come to us washed clean in heart and soul.
And this time she's upset about if it was real or not. Like, was that real? Like the first time she's like, seemed real. This time she's like, that had better not have been real because I am so upset with myself if that was real.
Bad? Shuriam pried her hands loose as if she were used to this reaction. It is always worse, and the third time is worse of all.
For very different reasons.
I have this little part highlighted of what Shuriam says. This Terangariel weaves traps for you from your own mind, weaves them tight and strong, harder than steel and more deadly than poison. This is why we use it as a test. You must want to be Aes Sedai more than anything else in the whole world, enough to face anything, fight free of anything, to achieve it. The White Tower cannot accept less.
It's sort of an odd test where, like, you have to want it more than anything else, but you can't remember it. You can't remember what you want.
You have to want it at a level that is way below conscious, which is weird for Nynaeve because she's been there like, 3 days and hasn't been an initiate the entire time?
I think it might even be less than that. But yeah, no time at all she's been there.
Well, but her subconscious is she has to make Moraine pay.
Yeah.
Right, which somehow means becoming Moraine's equal / superior.
Well, she definitely is jealous of Moraine and wants everything she has. I think she even says that at one point in one of the chapters.
Yeah, she has everything I want. Yeah.
Which is the ability to channel and land.
That's pretty much all Nynaeve wants.
Yeah. Well, the ability, she wants to protect the villagers, but she sees the one power as a way to do that.
It is.
Because she can heal like everything with the power. Of course, that's her path to total world domination.
And save Rand's mind. She literally does that.
Yeah.
No, she saves everyone else's mind, not Rand's mind.
Well, I guess I'm referring to cleansing Sidene. Rand kind of saves his own.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I think her support helps keep him sane. You know, he's one of the few Two River folks who stays with him the whole time, and
he trusts her even when he's insane.
Right.
Yeah, even down to Natron's Barrow, he still trusts
and
her.
I think she plays a huge role in saving his mind and keeping him stable enough to function to get to Veins of Gold.
Yeah, I love how he has such strong, powerful relationships with women that aren't always romantic. Like, not only does he have more than one romance interest, he also has really important mentor figures that are women that keep him grounded. I think that's really cool.
Moraine, Cadsuane, and Sorleia, Nynaeve.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, he has a few father figures. He's got Lan, he's got Tam, he's got Ruark.
Yeah.
It's like he says at the end, it's the people around me that made the difference this time.
And the way he was raised. I think Tam has a huge role in saving the world, simply by the way he raised Rand.
Which was not, completely devoid of Nynaeve's influence. she was becoming wisdom while Rand was like a little
She spanked
kid.
him, as she says many times.
Yeah. Battled your bottom.
Fear will keep you cautious. Caution will keep you alive.
I highlighted that too, yeah. After Nynaeve says she's afraid, which is out of character. Well, I shouldn't say out of character, but it's something Nynaeve doesn't do.
She doesn't admit
it.
Admits how afraid she is of this third.
The admitting is out of character, not being afraid.
Yeah.
I like that quote, the fear will keep you cautious, caution will keep you alive, because, especially applied to Elaine. Elaine is so crappy at being fearful and cautious. She's like, oh, look, a trap. Let me run into it. Yay!
I feel like she might literally say that at some... Well, not literally that, but, there's a trap set for us, so we're going to go spring it. Yeah. Doesn't she do that in...
Actually, Nynaeve.
Is it Nynaeve?
Yeah, when they're going to Tyr in The Dragon Reborn. Nynaeve's the best way to catch them is going to be to spring the trap. And it's that's...
Okay.
What?
I guess if you got Matt coming in after you, sure, but...
Yeah, they only berate him for 8 books for doing that.
They finally apologize. Brigida is a big part of that.
God, I love Brigida so much for her just slapping them down into that.
Well, I mean, talk about mature older sister. Yeah.
Seriously.
They needed her,
Yeah.
definitely. They didn't need another mother figure. They needed an older sister to, like, slap them around a little bit.
And also they give them a bridge to Matt, because, like, them and Matt are on such different wavelengths. Like, Brigida really, like, keeps them from being completely at odds.
And which is super important, because they need him to find the Bowl of Winds.
Yeah, like, save the world's climate system. God.
Brigida and Matt's friendship is one of my favorite just male-female friendships in this whole book.
I see that in the Discord server a lot. People say that. Everybody loves their relationship.
They're drinking buddies. It's fun to just hang out with them.
Fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's not serious. I mean, it can get serious, but, like, so often it's just hilarious. And you get all the cool little, like, world-building drops from, like, other eras that nobody else remembers. Like, yeah, they're just great. Flinching from a Chilton from the tax collector, and it's like, only they get that joke. Total in-joke.
It's like the ultimate in-joke crowd.
Yeah. There's only two of them.
Yeah.
I guess Rand gains, I mean, it's not over time the way those two are, but he gains Age of Legends memories.
Yeah.
Right. But Brigida and Matt really don't tap into those very much. Most of what they're tapping into is between the Age of Legends and the present day.
That's true.
Especially Matt, because Matt is limited to, like, I think the War of the 100 Years up through, I forget when. But he's not getting anything from before the Age of
There's
Legends.
a point where they stop going. I think the red doorway gets hidden away, and so I think it's been hidden for a couple hundred years. So since no one's gone through it, he, like, doesn't have any modern memories.
Oh.
Somewhere he gives an age bracket. In one of the later books, he, like, works out, like, the latest and earliest of his memories, and it gives you a good sense, but I forget what that bracket is.
I'm going to say from, like, the 100 Years' War to, like, 300 or 400 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. And Brigida obviously has memories from all over the place, but it's like the more proximate it is, the more vibrant the memory
and so
is.
I think memories older than the Age of Legends have almost already started to fade very quickly from her. Because she loses memories from oldest to newest.
Right. Which makes sense, because, like, she's supposed to be around for, like, ever. She can't hold all of them with equal vividness.
Hell, I can't remember what I did last week, much less a couple lifetimes ago.
I know, right? My last lifetime's just so fuzzy.
All right, I want everyone to think, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? Do you have any idea?
It took me a second, but yes.
Yeah, if you have to think about it.
You have to reconstruct it. You're like, what was I doing yesterday? What was I eating? What was in the fridge? Like, speaking of memory. Memory lurched and tilted, shifting fragments like broken ice on a flooding river. She clawed for the pieces, clawed for something to hang on to. But she seems to have complete memory in this third vision of the test.
She does.
Which is different than what's been going on in the first two.
Right, I was talking about this earlier. It's a part of the test. That's the way I perceive it. That she knows she has a choice and she has to make the choice.
It just seems to contradict some of the things, you know, the idea that being an Aes Sedai is something you have to want on an unconscious level.
Yeah.
Do we know that that's the intent? That she's not supposed to be able to remember anything at all?
I mean, Sheriam says no one else could. That, like, whenever we send them through unprotected and no one remembers anything, it doesn't seem like, oh, they remember a little bit in the third one, or there's some memory. It does seem to be like no one should even be able to remember they can channel, which means they shouldn't remember that they're in a test for being accepted. So this seems to be just a huge exception for Nynaeve.
We kind of talked about this a lot already, but this test is with Lan. It's her idyllic world where she's queen of Malkier and he's king, and they have 3 beautiful babies, and everything's kind of great in the world.
It's like the opposite of the previous one, where, like, everything's horrible, you have to fix it. Here's, like, everything's great, don't you want it?
Right.
There's butterflies.
So she has to choose this kind of unknown life in a world where she doesn't understand, and she's, you know, at the bottom of the totem pole, or she can choose her fantasy future, like her kind of perfect vision of how things could go.
And this is what she wants after the last battle, ultimately. I mean, this is where they're going after the last battle, is rebuilding Malkier and, like, having babies. Like, we know that that's what they're going to do.
And that's where we see Sharina Sedai show up. And, you know, one possible future would be Sharina being an Aes Sedai and a friend of Nynaeve's.
Yeah, it makes sense that
Right.
they would be friends in the future. Oh, when I was reading about Sharina Sedai, there's a scene later in the books where Egwene asks if she can introduce Nynaeve to Sharina. She says, I think you would like each other. You both have this great talent for healing. Like, I should introduce the two of you. I don't think that we actually see it happening, but there is this kind of implication that they would get along or, discuss their craft or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're both extremely talented,
sure.
powerful healers.
And so it's
strong personalities.
Mhm.
They would either get along or hate each other.
But it follows really well that in the future, Lan and Nynaeve are king and queen of Malkier. They clear the blight, and Sharina Sedai is their advisor from the White Tower, or,
At least present.
Yeah.
Right. Because she's always idolized the Borderlands and Malkier, so of course she'd be like, place me there!
I'd be interested to know what the Borderlands ended up being like after the blight faded. I mean, I imagine there's a fair amount of cleanup to do. The blight didn't. So, the blight retreated.
Land to reclaim.
Didn't it? Did it go away completely, or did it just retreat after the dark?
Blight retreats. I would assume there's still oh geez, I don't even know anything about this, but I would assume there's just tons of Trollocs still.
They do say it's going to take them a while to clean up all the rest of the Trollocs. So the battle's not totally over.
Tons of war.
But the blight is the Dark One is no longer influencing the ecology of the North.
Yeah.
So my assumption would be that the blight would continue to retreat over time.
Right.
And they would be rebuilding their country.
You just have Trollocs living in regular looking places.
And what would the Borderlanders do? Because they talk about how that's why they don't have the Game of Houses and why they haven't changed as much over the centuries is because they have the blight to keep them focused and not fighting each other. So what would happen once they've cleaned up the blight and there's that pressure isn't there? What do they explode into?
And I would think it would take a couple generations, possibly. But that would be a really interesting sort of speculative future writing of, Randland post the last battle, we get a glimpse of one potential future with Nynaeve's visions, but there's so many other ways that it could go.
Sure.
Especially if you have Aiel Wise Ones going to those columns and seeing new possible visions and making new changes and, bending the curve in a very different direction.
Right. And we know that it used to be it was the column Dawn was on an island in the north of the Randland planet. The blight is where all of that stuff happened. That's where it's all radiating out. Shale Ghoul is ground zero for the boar.
Yeah, I always assume that.
That was the thinness in the pattern.
Probably the one. If anything stayed in place, it's the boar.
Yeah.
That's the way I saw it. I have nothing to back that up.
It's kind of like the Well of Ascension, and this is spoilers for Brandon Sanderson's book. It turns out with the Well of Ascension.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm halfway through that book right now. Nice work.
I said spoilers.
I know. I'm cool. It's fine. It's fine. I've been reading them really slowly, so I knew that this was going to happen.
That is a pretty big spoiler for those books, so maybe I'll cut that out or something. I imagine the thinness didn't move, despite the changing of the land and the breaking and all the movement going on.
But they're still going to have to find the thinness again, right? Because Rand, does more than just patch it up. He rebuilds.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is the thinness still there after he patches the prison? Is the thinness of the pattern just exist independently of the prison? Because it was there before the hole was drilled.
Right. Yeah, I'd be inclined to think so. It's some sort of celestial north or something. It doesn't change. Well, celestial north does change, actually, so it's not a good metaphor, but...
I get what you're saying, yeah. It's just that's just the way the pattern... That's just where the pattern thins.
Right, and I liked your theory from a while back about how the Dark One's prison might be Teleran Rayod in some way. And so, maybe, there's always an anchor point, right, between all the various worlds that might be. And between the portal worlds, between Teleran and Rayod, there has to be somewhere that they all project out from that's common to all those places. So the boar, Yeah, that would make sense. I would nod to
Well,
that.
and it's the one place where during the last battle we see all the various worlds combine into one.
Oh yeah, with all the shadowy
Like the lizard
yeah.
people and Telon Riyadh
Whoa, I
becomes
forgot
real,
all about that.
and that all occurs.
And the Aelfin and the Eelfin.
And that all
Yeah,
occurs
that's
right
there.
there in that single spot. So that would make sense that that's sort of the connecting pole. Sort of think of all the different worlds as like sheets in a binder, and that's like the 3 rings that go through the hole punch. That's a terrible analogy.
3 rings to bind them all.
No, I mean, it works. It works.
Oh, jeez.
9 rings for mortal
Maybe it's
men.
not like a staple.
Yeah, staple. I like that. And that would explain the weakness, too, because it's like pushing a hole through it.
I'm noticing here that we pretty much went over this scene, but when at the end here, when Lan says, "Please stay with me always," and Nynaeve responds, "I want to stay with you," and then the arch is gone. When she verbalizes it, I just thought it was interesting that as it's happening in her head, that she's, I guess, not making a decision, but she's feeling that she's kind of coming to a conclusion. She's like, I really want to stay here. I want to stay with you. That's when the arch disappears.
She has that moment where she's like, I want to stay. And the arch is like, fine, you're good. I'm out. Peace.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, well, because, I mean, Lan is happy, she's having babies, the 7 towers are rebuilt. Like, why would you not want to stay? Who would not want to stay in that?
Yeah.
The only reason she wouldn't is because she knows she has obligations back in the real world.
Which is like, it takes her a minute to remember that. And the arch is like, nope, you missed your chance. Like, we're done.
Could stay here with Lan. Nothing has changed, her thoughts turned. Nothing has changed. Egwene is alone in the White Tower. Rand will channel the power and go mad. And what of Mat and Perrin? Can they take back any shred of their lives? And Moraine, who tore all our lives apart, still walks free.
This is the part where the world seems to continue after the doorway fades. Now, it's possible that the Aes Sedai are still pumping power into it in the real world.
I think they are. Because they're not surprised when she comes back. It's not like with Egwene's where it's like they're fighting to hold it.
Right.
Like, they just are like, oh, look, you came back. How shocking. Like, they're not shocked at all. So I don't think that it has a chance to power down, but maybe if she'd waited like another 5 minutes, it would have started to power down.
And then maybe the world would have disappeared and her along with it.
Do the Aes Sedai in the chamber have to, like, they open it and hold it open?
They have to be channeling into it the whole time. And then when it was allowed to grow quiet, when they stopped channeling into it, and no one's there.
Mm-hmm. And if the light flickers on the way up and on the way down, and it's soft and steady once it's fully powered up.
I don't think we ever hear an example, but I'd be interested to hear how long they wait. Like, how long do they wait for you to come back?
That's a good question. Because, again, time's a little wobbly
in
this particular test. Because we do
hours,
think
days.
Because, for here, it seems like she walks in, she says a couple of words to Lan, and then she summons the archway and heads back. But in that time, the Emerald Seat shows up, a bunch of other Aes Sedai show up. Like, time definitely seems a little wobbly, but it's not more than a day. It's not more than a couple of hours.
No, I wouldn't say it's more than hours, but we don't really know how long it is.
Yeah, maybe it's like how like strongly her mind is like engaging with the ter'angreal, like gives them some kind of metric for like, oh, she's like drifting away into the fantasy. She's like coming back to the door. Like maybe there's something there, like with her soul, like influencing the ter'angreal. There has to be some kind of an interaction between the Aes Sedai channeling the ter'angreal and the woman being tested. There has to be something that they can feel of that.
I don't know. I bet it might just be a period of time. It's like we have to wait, and then no one's ever come back after 24 hours or 6 hours or whatever the time is. No one's ever come back after that.
Yeah, kind of like with the Aiel test. They're like, nah, after 7 days, you're good.
Right.
Like, it's not happening after 7 days or 10 days, whatever.
And the difference here is that you actually have women who have a limited endurance actively channeling.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so when she goes back in for the 3rd time, it's like, it's not going to be more than 4 hours because these women are going to keel over if they keep channeling.
Right.
So then the Amerlin just sits around and, like, waits and, like, plays Candy Crush, like, on her phone, like, just waiting for the woman to come back. Like, she's kind of a busy woman. Like, how can she hang around for every accepted to come out?
Well, that's why she's not hanging around for the first 2. She's like, all right, only after they gone. All right, she's gone in for the third
Yeah.
one.
Send a runner when
Send a
when she
runner.
gets into the third one. It won't be too long after that.
And
I
they
like that
really
idea.
don't have that many accepted raised. It's definitely a fairly rare thing that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
Yeah, that's true. I always think of it as being really big, but yeah.
I don't know that this is true, but I see Swan as, I mean, she makes a special exception for Nynaeve. I think Swan really likes her. She likes that Nynaeve has this, how did Swan say it? You've got fire in you, or like you've got an attitude. She says, like a fisher bird with a bone stuck in its throat.
Yeah.
I don't remember what.
Yeah. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, I don't know how much I'm putting on this, like from my own head, but I see it as like Swan seeing herself in Nynaeve.
A little bit. A young, powerful channeler.
Yeah, with all this potential and all this, acidity. Is that the right word?
I think she's got a little more. She sees herself in Egwene much more than Nynaeve.
Yeah, maybe.
And she's there for all of the accepted to come out. She's always there at the end of the accepted test. Well, the two that we
I
see.
didn't even realize that.
I guess it is Nynaeve and Egwene, so maybe that doesn't hold water.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 40 novices. Maybe 10 of them are going to go on to be Aes Sedai and accepted. So, like, I don't know. How many of these can they do a year? Not that many.
Yeah, it might just be, a noteworthy enough event that the Amerlin always
I feel like
attends.
it's almost like one
But
a
doesn't-
year seems to be like the right, like,
That's what I was
like
gonna
maybe
say.
2 a year.
Yeah. Well, because there's not enough accepted to
Yeah.
do it more than that.
Right.
So I do wonder what would happen if they had like the tower at capacity and it was like every other day. Like, would they be like delegating it to like the heads of Ajas or
Probably.
something?
Yeah.
Or the sitters, I mean? Because like, if you had like 300 novices, you'd be
Yeah,
cranking
well, I
them
mean, the
out.
size of the organization definitely changes. And I imagine the Armelin would show up to some of them. So Nynaeve deliberately channels without being angry here.
Yeah, it's more like desperation than anger.
Yeah. Unable to bear the pain on his face, she pulled free of him. Deliberately, she formed a flower bud in her mind, a white bud, on a blackthorn branch. She made the thorns sharp and cruel, wishing they could pierce her flesh. Wishing they could pierce her flesh. Just saying.
Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling as if she already hung in the blackthorn's branches. Shuriam Sedai's voice danced just out of hearing, telling her it was dangerous to attempt to channel the power. The bud opened, and Saidar filled her with light. It doesn't work at first. She tries to picture the arch. And then I'll skip ahead to this part here where she's like, it seems like she's about to burn herself out. She drew at Saidar, drinking in the flow of the one power, till she thought she would burst, the radiance filling her, shining around her, hurt her own eyes. The heat seemed to consume her. The flickering arch firmed, steadied, stood whole before her. Fire and pain seemed to fill her. So it seems like she does almost burn herself out.
It reminds me of Rand's descriptions of the times that we think that he almost burned himself out. It's a very similar kind of like head exploding fire pain. Like, she has to be so close to the edge of that.
And putting every inch of that power into recreating that arch.
And there's this kind of, for lack of a better term, stretching where Rand, Egwene, it looks like maybe Nynaeve here are all going through the same thing when they're learning how to channel. They can't channel very much at first. And when they push themselves, they get stronger, closer to their potential, She may not be at her potential.
And I also was thinking that, like, she shouldn't have survived this on so many levels, right? Because, like, the arch goes away, like, she almost burns herself out.
Yeah.
But, like, as we were talking about before, Rand needs her on so many levels. Like, the last battle would be lost if she burned herself out or let herself get lost in the world. Like, end of world right there, book 2. We're done. So, like, I wonder how much, like, Rand's Ta'veren, like, it gives her that little, like, statistical edge to, like, manage to survive these, like, levels of crucibles that she's going through
It's
right
not
here.
out of the question.
I was reading, actually, Dies the Fire, which you recommended.
Yeah, it's
and
a fun one.
There was an
Oh, yeah.
interesting thought where they get, it's post-apocalyptic, and they're like, to get to this point, you've had an unprecedented string of luck. And her response was, anyone who gets to this point has had an unprecedented string of luck. Like, just surviving is super, super lucky. And I sort of see a similar thing here where things have to work out in super lucky situations for these characters to survive.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is driven by the Tiberan nature of some of our main characters. And that may influence, like here, it may influence Nynaeve even without necessarily her being Tiberan.
I think that's really likely. As much as I'd like to believe that Nynaeve survives and bends everything just with the sheer force of her stubborn will, because it suits her, but that's maybe a little too much.
Going back to the discussion we had about whether channeling is real or not in Tel'aran'rhiod.
Yeah.
It does seem that embracing Sidar or Sidene gives you the ability to make changes in the world of dreams a little bit easier, or you're able to make more powerful changes. That it seems like embracing Sidar helps Nynaeve bring the archway back.
Yeah. I liked what Aradia said before, actually, where it kind of gives you the mechanics to understand how to fix the problem. You know what I mean? So, and as opposed to, I guess, if Perrin were in this position, he would think about the problem in a different way, whereas Nynaeve has this thing that she knows that she can do.
And so just the fact that she thinks she's embracing the power helps her. She thinks she's more powerful, so she's then able to have more confidence and bring the archway back through.
Or just that she knows that this is a thing that she can do.
Right.
Or this is a tool that she can use.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she knows that Sidar is powering the Terangrial on the other side. She knows that Sidar is connected to the archway somehow.
But in any case, whether she's channeling or forcing her will on Tel'aran'rhiod or whatever's happening here, it works.
So she makes it back. And says the first thing she says is, "I hate you. I hate all Aes Sedai."
Yeah, she is so pissed.
She says almost every woman who does this says much of the same thing.
And this is just Shirion being like her sweet, loving, blue, not black sister self.
Right.
Like, this is why she's a good mistress of novices. She's like, it's okay, honey. You can hate me. It's fine.
She's like the nice aunt character. She's, yeah.
Yeah. Like, how could you be black, Shirion? How?
Black. It definitely shows a bit more nuance in why and how people become black. That it's not just, oh, they're jealous or hateful or, they want power. It's like
they want to rule the world. Yeah.
I've had the thought before too that a lot of the people who turned black, a long time ago, went to Sword of the Dark One a long time ago, likely would never have thought it possible that the Dark One was actually gonna be free and the Forsaken would be walking the earth. They made this deal to get a little one-up in life, and what difference does it really make?
It's like joining a secret society or a biker gang because you like ride motorcycles on the weekends, and then like you show up and like, so this weekend we're robbing a bank, and you're like, wait, what? Like, and they're like, yeah. I
You show up and you're like, I thought this was a barbecue, and you're like, no, we're cooking meth today.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's literally why Shirion got into it. Like, we learn, later, it's like she just got into it for politics. Like, that was it. Just to rise in White Tower politics. Like, there was no final reckoning with the Dark Lord on my agenda when I signed up for this.
That's the way I see a lot of their decisions. Like Varen, she made this decision because she thought it would be interesting, not because she thought she would, potentially be.
She had a choice.
Well, sure.
She ended up in a situation where it was death or Black Aja.
Oh, that's right.
So she was investigating the Black Aja because she was curious, and then sort of stumbled into something, which we don't know exactly what, but...
Right. But still, Varen wasn't like, I'm going to give this to, the Amerlin that takes down a freaking castle, an entire army of enemy channelers from left field. That was not what she got into it for.
No, that wasn't her original intention. But when she, just like with, I don't think she was trying to find Bran, but when she stumbled on him, she's like, yeah, I know what this is now.
Shiriam notices the thorns, pulls them out and heals them. There's a scar left behind.
And we do see that frequently with Tel'aran'rhiod, that healing doesn't work quite as well on wounds taken in Tel'aran'rhiod. Varen has one, and she shows that off when she gives Egwene the ring.
Oh, that's right.
She says, I tried it once, and she's like, be careful. The wound didn't heal as well as one should have. So that's a pretty common thing with Teleron Riyadh.
I wonder if it's because there are as much scars in the mind as.
I always thought it had something to do with that.
Shiriam just kind of wraps it up neatly as well. There's always a price. You've paid the first price. Take what you have paid for.
Which is being raised to accepted.
Yeah. And Swan does the final cleansing ritual. You are washed clean of Nynaeve Almira from Emmons Field. You are washed clean of all ties that bind you to the world. You come to us washed clean, in heart and soul. You are Nynaeve Almira, accepted of the White Tower. Handing the chalice over to one of the sisters, the Emerlin drew Nynaeve to her feet. You are sealed to us now. The Emerlin's eyes seemed to hold a dark glow. Nynaeve's shiver had nothing to do with being naked and wet.
Suan definitely wants to use Nynaeve. She knows she's an ally of Rand.
Yeah.
She knows Rand's the Dragon Reborn.
She's like, oh, good, another heavy hammer for me to shape the world with, you know.
You are bound to us, and by us I mean me.
Yeah.
You are now a tool I get to use.
Yeah, you're strong, you're tied to the dragon, and you're mine.
Tied to the dragon.
I just want to put out there, like, she's ending this chapter of an incredible transformation, just like you end the transformation of being born, naked and wet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe that's part of the symbolism.
And, like, at your mother's feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's being born into
Sisterhood.
Yeah.
Well, the first phase.
Into the White Tower. Yeah.
Into the order of the Aes Sedai?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, and into a world where she's going to live for a lot longer and have a much deeper understanding of, like, the geopolitics of the land and have access to way more wealth. I mean, this is a very different life than Nynaeve the Wisdom was ever going to have.
Rituals are important to people. It's also a way of saying you're different from everyone else now.
Do a bunch of, like, Two Rivers wisdoms live super long time?
That's a good question. I don't
You'd think they
think we know, but it must have happened at some point, right? At least, like, significantly longer than they should have.
Because a lot of them can listen to the wind, which means they can channel. Some of them have the ability to heal.
Yeah, and it super begs the question, too, of, like, where was Egwene going to go then if Nynaeve was going to be wisdom for, like, 200 years?
Like 800 years.
Or 800 years.
We don't know what would happen to a Wilder.
Yeah.
They seem to live, I mean, like we see with the kin, the Wilders seem to live a long time.
I mean, they know what they're doing. I don't really know why that would have anything to do with it, but they know that they're channeling at least. Because, I mean, if a wisdom lives for a long time, you know, not just the wisdom would be the wisdom wouldn't be the only woman who could potentially channel in the village, you know? So there would have to be, like, a handful of them scattered around the village at any given time, and men as well. Rand isn't an example, but it's in the blood, so.
Or maybe it's like the splitting out and coming back together. And, like, maybe Nynaeve is, like, the strongest concentration of Manetheren blood in, like, you know, umpteen generations.
Sure. And, you know, Egwene's really powerful too.
Kind of like that.
Just in a relative sense amongst the Aes Sedai, she's
strong. And they both have the spark. I think the other girls in the Two Rivers who are kin channel, they don't have the spark. They're capable of learning.
Gotcha.
I think there's two that have the spark. I think Varen and Alana mentioned that there's, like, two with the spark in addition to Egwene and Nynaeve, but they don't get, like, names or trajectories for those characters.
And aren't they in the Two Rivers, not necessarily Emmons Field? So they could be in, like, Terran Ferry or
right, yeah, they're from the greater Two Rivers area. Yeah.
I don't think we ever really see, like, average lifespans or enough lifespans to know how to average.
I'm just going to assume that most of the other wisdoms listening to the wind isn't a huge use of the power, and so it doesn't significantly affect lifespans.
Yeah.
And that the healing is probably rare enough that maybe
I sort of imagined maybe enough that they could get away with it, you know, like 150 years or something, just like an absurdly old person, but also not really out of the question.
Yeah,
you know?
And no one's really keeping track of when they were born, since they're the oldest person around. It's like that really old wisdom that's been around forever.
How old are you? Don't worry about it, kid.
Right. I mean, she's the one in charge of memorizing all the birth and death dates. Like, yeah.
People don't know anything. Her herbs work really good, so
surprisingly
it's that tea she drinks every day.
And maybe it has to do with like conscious control. Like if you accidentally channel, it doesn't have the same like impact on like your metabolic processes of aging. Whereas like
and I mean
doing it
the frequency with which a wilder like Nynaeve would channel would be, I'm thinking like maybe a few times a year.
Yeah.
So that's probably my biggest assumption, is that just the frequency would be so low that it would have a relatively small effect on lifespan.
Just her exposure to Sidar.
Yeah.
Right, because the kin don't channel often, but they still channel a hell of a lot more than an untrained wisdom.
And speaking of Sharina, it does appear that channeling can actually take years off your life if you're doing it frequently.
Oh, right, she gets old.
Right.
She doesn't have the spark, but she's an old woman and it reverses.
Exactly.
You were saying that before, Aradia, right?
So yeah, the more you channel, the younger you get.
I've had an interesting couple of days. I've been washing dishes at the local bar.
Hey, it's actually a great gig. I did it
Cash,
for
which is always fun.
like a whole year of my life. I was just a dishwasher. But $12 an hour, cash, and then a tip out at the end of the day. So you're actually doing pretty good.
I made way more money washing dishes than I made in my office
But,
job.
I mean, no
For the
taxes,
same
no
amount of
benefits.
work
But,
time.
I mean...
No taxes, no benefits.
Yeah, there's that.
Also, it's hard
And
work.
not a lot of people are really
It's
interested in the
physical
job
work.
title dishwasher.
And I am tired.
Interested in the job title dishwasher.
Right, for some reason they don't like that. But it's it's nice that I can get a little extra cash in my back pocket. It's just the local bar I go down to, and I was just complaining about work, and they're like, "Yeah, we always need a dishwasher if you want some extra cash."
Oh, I kind of want to go
So,
find
sure,
that
I'll wash dishes
scene
for
from
cash.
Enter the Dragon where the lady tries to convince Bruce Lee to come back and be a dishwasher, which she says, "We can always use a good dishwasher." And it's like this really intense, I'm sorry, Bruce Lee was a dishwasher?
But yeah, just the regular dishwasher. When he gets sick every once in a while, they just call me in. It's nice because then I get a little bit behind the scenes, and I get to hang out with the cooks, and I get free beer, and I get free food. And it's really all about the
And
perks.
because
more
there's no
than
benefits.
the work.
There's just not like health benefits.
There's tons of benefits. There's just
Yeah,
not
who
like
needs
health
that?
benefits. But yeah, so we're doing something a little bit different today. We've had a few other guests. We've had John Michael, we've had Kelsey, and we're going to get
Aradia. I
Aradia.
swear to God, it's Aradia.
Aradia.
I
God
just-
It's okay. I
damn
have
it.
to convince like
Aradia.
everyone how to say it. So I have to train literally everybody I meet on how to say my name. Yeah, it's just like Arabia. It's
Like
just like Arabia.
Nights. Aradia.
Arabia.
Yeah.
Aradia.
You just literally
Alright.
mirror that consonant at the end, and you're good. But whatever. That's what having hippie parents will get you, I
Yeah.
guess. So no, not a greenie.
It is not Egwene. He's just such a great speaking voice. So dramatic.
It's a shame he never did the audiobooks.
Oh,
It's a shame
yeah.
he never
Oh my
did the
God,
audio.
seriously. If he just read like the opening paragraph, even that would have been amazing.
I wonder if there's a recording of him out there somewhere.
I would
I wonder if
think.
there's a recording of him out there somewhere.
Give that a quick
reading
Google.
the opening paragraph.
Well, anyhow, thanks for
Right,
inviting me
there's some
on,
stuff
you guys.
in there.
I'm like super excited to get to be part of audio.
Yeah, you. I think. Well, back when you first started listening, did you message?
Yeah, that
us?
was
You
my
were
big
"I'd love
one
to be
email.
your
I'm like, you
guest."
guys have to let me on. I'll bring beer. Like, little did I know I could do it through the internet.
That is the way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I just said.
I mean, that is the way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I just said, come on, hang out in the Discord channel and provide good feedback, and you've been doing that for ages now. And so I figured it was about time to have you on, and thank you for all the great feedback and all the help you've given us during the live recordings, and also give you a chance to to voice those opinions and just show how much you know about the Wheel of Time, which I've definitely seen from all the feedback. So I wanted to start with asking you, how did you come to the Wheel of Time? When did you start reading?
So I was in 7th grade, and that was right about when I started to feel very invisible and sad. And this boy I had a crush on was like, "Here's this massive novel. You should read it." And like 3 days later, I came back, and I'm like, "Okay, where's the next one?" So he basically loaned me his entire series, and that was up through Towers of Midnight, I think, because it was like early 2000s. And I just loved them. And then high school like sucked, and Wheel of Time got me through high school.
Oh, wow.
Basically.
I'm nodding.
And then I started to get the audiobooks, and I've just literally been listening to them on repeat, like while I was out in the woods trying to like be a farmer and like all this stuff. I was always listening to Wheel of Time, like constantly. So sometimes I'll be listening to a scene and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that patch of blackberries that I was really, really pissed off at that one time when I listened to this scene." Like I have so many visceral life experiences tied to different parts of the Wheel of Time.
That sounds a lot like us.
Yeah, and I don't know where any of the scenes are, like, in the books. Like, I have no idea, because it's just all one great big, like, mash.
It's just one long story to me. So I have to hear, like, I just have to hear the, like, relevant plot to, like, if you tell me it's, like, chapter whatever of book whatever, I'm like, I don't remember what was happening.
But if it's before X and after Y, then it's like, yes, I know what's going on there.
And, like, I know Dumais Wells.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And, like, I know Dumais Wells is the end of Lord of Chaos,
Right.
and that's a big marker for me. And I know the cleansing is at the end of Winter's Heart. So there's a few things like that. He gets Kalendor at the end of The Dragon Reborn. So there's definitely a few, like, markers where I can tell, like, whether he's done something or not. And so I can put it within this range of 2 or 3 books. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like asking me what chapter does that occur in the book. And I'm like, I don't know.
Right, like, do I look like a biblical scholar over here? I don't memorize these things.
Well, I think the audiobook has a lot to do with that, too.
Well, I think the audiobook has a lot to do with that, too, because as it's
And
much
being
more
a biblical
continuous
scholar,
to
by
it on the
comparison,
audiobook.
would be really easy. It's only like the length of the eye of the world. It's not that long.
Right? Totally. Yeah, well, now that we're doing this podcast, I've been buying the paperbacks, so now I am going to be able to keep track of what happens, because, like, as you guys get to each new book, I'm going to buy the paperback and, like, be able to follow along. So hopefully that will help give me my roadmap, but we'll see.
Nice.
I had a bus driver
Nice.
when I was in 7th grade.
I had a bus driver when I was in 7th grade, and also about the time when I discovered the Wheel of Time. And she would, because I was like the first pickup, and so a lot of times we'd end up just like stop somewhere because she was ahead of schedule, and she'd pull out her Bible and start highlighting. And she'd basically go line by line and highlight every single word. And I was just always fascinated by that. I mean, I guess it's a way to just, make sure your eyes are going forward and reading. But she went through Bible after Bible after Bible doing that, and I was just fascinated. I used to watch her for hours. So I was stuck on the bus. Then I'd be reading the Wheel of Time, and I'd be like, well, that's great that you've got your Bible. I've got mine over here.
And mine's cooler.
Mine's definitely better.
It's got
And
like
mine's
a
way
cohesive
better. Mine's definitely better
plot,
written.
The physics are consistent. The rules of magic don't keep changing every era. Yeah, my mom got really into the idea of the Bible as a sci-fi story for a while, and I kind of enjoyed skimming it with that sort of filter on my perspective. It made it a much more interesting story.
That's the only filter I've ever read the Bible through, honestly.
That's the only filter I've ever read the Bible
Yeah, well, it was
through,
the only time I've read the
honestly.
Bible, so yeah, exactly.
I think it's the only way I could sit down and read the Bible.
I think it's the only way I could sit down and read the Bible as a sort of poorly written by committee sci-fi fantasy novel.
Yeah.
In a like alternate universe where people live for 600 years and there's some other wacky rules. Well, that's one of the real contributions I think Jordan made to the fantasy genre, is that magic has rules now. And I think Sanderson takes that to its extreme logical conclusion. But I think that Jordan's was the first person who sort of created this framework where there was a male half and a female half, and they both pushed and pulled, and you had weaves and these 5 powers and the way they interacted, and I didn't really ever see anything like that before. Jordan in
a
fantasy
surprising
genre.
amount There's quite a few religious folks who are into the Wheel of Time. I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a decent amount of people, especially since I've been following a bunch of people on Twitter who mention the Wheel of Time, that there are people who are very religious and find the Wheel of Time. And I guess I don't really, it's not that I don't understand that, I guess I don't know how those things interact in people's heads, or if they do at all. If it's just one's a story and one's religion, and they're not,
I guess I don't really understand how someone with a
they don't interact. I guess I don't really understand how someone with a religious background views so much of the modern entertainment that has its basis, in many cases, in a lot of the
I don't know.
stories.
If Harry Potter's not
in,
cool, is the Wheel of
Bible.
Time? Are Aes Sedai witches?
Kelsey's wants to contribute.
Kelsey's wants to contribute. Anyway, yeah, we can talk about that later, but that was just thought. Sorry, folks, I'm a little tired, so taking a while to get warmed up here and start rolling. Was there any other preamble you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I'm
Or
interested.
you interested
I'm
in
just reading
actually
what people are
jumping
writing
into
here.
the
It's interesting, so reacting to what we just talked about.
I like Enigma's response. One's a religion.
I like Enigma's response. One's a religion and one's a story.
Ah!
Just view
Oh my
them as
God.
opposite.
Okay. And I'm back.
Cool. Oh, yeah, we're mostly just reading what people are saying.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we were
As far as
we're
religion
mostly just reading
goes,
what
I
people are
just
saying.
I just like to say I believe I don't know anything.
Amen to that.
Yeah. That seems the safest bet. You cannot verify any of this, so just live my life morally.
Yeah, well, see,
Reasonably morally,
Yeah, well, see, I tend to go.
When there's that whole concept,
Yeah.
you need religion to tell you what's right and wrong, then maybe you're the problem, not like the religion.
maybe you should.
Right.
Which
Maybe you should
one way to do
learn
that is
some
reading
empathy.
books.
Which can, one way to
Yeah.
do that is reading these books.
But yeah, I don't see
Yeah.
religion as certainly exclusive with the books.
But yeah, I don't see religion as certainly as exclusive with the books. It's just interesting. It's an interesting filter to read the books through, I think. And I'd be interested to hear someone's perspective on it. It was interesting actually listening to the Legendarium guys, because they're fairly admittedly devout Christians. They talk about that in their podcast frequently. And so they occasionally brought up the Bible in relationship to it, but they clearly
The
saw
Wheel
them
of Time and the
as
Bible?
separate things.
Yeah, just the way that they're related.
Yeah,
It's
Just
hard.
the way that they're
It's hard
related.
not to see.
It's hard. It's hard
The
not to
parallel
see
stories.
Between Rand as a, he's
the parallels between Rand as a, he's a very much a Jesus figure. But that's because Jordan deliberately put parallels between every major
Sure.
religious work that he could find
The Bible's just one of them.
and built those in. The Bible.
I just have to go to school day in and day out. Geology and
What do you
geography,
study?
Nice.
which is pretty fun. I'm actually switching majors like on Tuesday from geology to geography because then I won't have to take physics, and I'm like horrid at physics, like so bad. I'm so bad. I can't believe I got through chemistry and calculus, and physics has just continued to defeat me. I'm just like, you know what? I can go play with maps. That will be way more fun. But I still love geology. I absolutely adore geology, and I'm getting my minor in it anyway.
Nice. Is it undergrad?
Actually,
Nice.
yeah, it's all
Is it
all undergrad. I actually tried to look up a map for the geology of Randland because like they did that for Game of Thrones. There's like geologic maps of how the Game of Thrones universe like works, and I can't find anything like that for Randland. So I'm like half tempted to try to make one because like the breaking would create such interesting geology.
That would be awesome.
Like in the basement of the tower, it says it's pale stone, and I'm like, what kind of stone sits in the middle of a river and is pale? Like it's probably some sort of granitic basement rock, right? Like, but I don't know.
I would assume either a limestone or a marble.
I would assume either a limestone or a marble, or maybe not that I know anything about geology, so I'll defer to your.
Yeah, and then like the way that North Harbor like points right into the river, I'm like, how is that not eroding? Because that's like a lot of force coming down in the Aranon. Like, I'm studying river processes this term. Like, I'm thinking about erosion like so much.
Well, clearly that was, a weave set up to maintain.
Well, clearly that was, a weave set up to maintain
Oh yeah.
the area. Or you could go with
That,
Oh,
that
yeah.
would have
I
been
just
what
always thought it was such an odd
the
place.
explanation I came up
It's
with.
just weird.
Well,
Yeah, I just feel like it would be really bad currents.
it's like, what
Well,
is
and George-
the like right angle of
And then just like what causes the like right angle of mountainous ranges between the blight and the
Yeah, well, I always interpreted that as like the waste was like an old ocean basin, and that's why it's so like jagged and fucked up, is because it was all like oceanic, like mountain ranges and like rift valleys and stuff. But and so then I guess like the spine of the world is kind of the Himalaya, like you had like a continent ramming up against an ocean basin. But yeah. And like I said, I want to make a map. I really want to make this map and like dive into all of the geologic underpinnings of what the breaking would have looked like. Because there was a theory in geology for a long time to make it fit into the 6,000 year biblical version of geology. It was called catastrophism, whereas like only catastrophic events have changed the world. And I always thought the breaking was an excellent like hat nod to that theory of how the world could come to look the way
I
it
like
does.
that. It is kind of a head nod, isn't it?
I like that.
That's
It is
fascinating.
It's very
So
biblical.
anyhow, yeah, super.
I mean, well, yeah, and we're coming up on Armageddon.
well, yeah, and we're coming up on
Yeah.
Tarmogoyf.
No similarities today.
No,
I've never noticed that before, but yeah, wow.
You never noticed the Tarmogoyf?
This really similar Tarmogoyf
You never
and
noticed the
Armageddon.
Tarmogoyf
That's
was
a really
basically
similar
anagram?
term.
Uh-huh.
And Patrick's learning.
And Patrick's learning.
So,
You can learn things through fantasy.
So yeah, you really can.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?